In the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I'm Anthropomantic Fiend, and I do horror-related things on the internet. Before I get into the review, I want to give a quick thank you to the Soulless Trenchcoat, who has recently done my heavy horror tag. That has been added to the playlist that I've linked in my past few videos, so if you want to check that out, please do. I will probably be linking that below as well. I'm just very happy whenever someone does my tag, so I think it is only fair that I give them a little shout out. Today I'm going to be reviewing Mutant. This is a movie that came out in 1984 and was originally under the title Night Shadows, but once it got released onto video, it was called Mutant from then on. And I kind of prefer Night Shadows as the title for this movie because it doesn't really give away what's happening. While there are some people who might be notable to genre fans of low-budget movies who worked on this movie in here somewhere, I didn't really recognize them. The one person who did pique my interest was soundtrack composer Richard Band, and I was just like, in passing, wonder if he's related to Charles Band, because thanks to Dave Maggot kind of ranting about full moons and kind of the whole Puppet Master box set deal, I've kind of had Charles Band on the brain. It turns out that Richard Band is actually Charles Band's brother, which I just thought was quite interesting. Charles Band's brother did movie soundtracks apparently, and he did a pretty good one for this movie. This movie is about two brothers who are on their way to a summer vacation in a little sleepy southern town, or so they think. It turns out to not be very sleepy at all. They get knocked off the road by a bunch of obnoxious, stereotypical redneck characters, and their car winds up in a ditch. So they end up hitchhiking their way into the town, and gradually they realize that things aren't quite as they seem, and something in the town is creating mutants. There is something that has been infecting people's blood and basically turning them into zombies. They never call them zombies by name, but they are zombies. They are 200% zombies. This is a zombie movie. It is a bit of a slow burn, and they don't really explicitly say anything about the zombie stuff until an hour into the movie. But that's not really a spoiler, because unlike with the original title Night Shadows, this movie is straight up called Mutant. You know that there's supposed to be some kind of mutation in the movie, so you've kind of got that expectation set up. I don't think that's a spoiler. You've got the score by Richard Band, which doesn't reinvent the wheel or anything, but it is enjoyably creepy, and it has an epic, slightly more modern feel than the scores I usually talk about, probably because this movie came out in the 80s, but also because, surprisingly, this score was recorded by the National Philharmonic Orchestra, which, for a tiny low-budget horror film with a score written by Charles Band's brother, I don't know how they managed that, but it is one of the highlights of the movie. It's a very lush, epic-sounding score that does manage to amp up the tragedy and the apocalyptic feel of some of the later parts of the film. In contrast to the lush, epic feel of the score, the print quality of the movie that we've got in this box set is not the best. Not everything is very clear, the colors are a bit faded, but I'm used to crappy video quality, so I did not care. The actors do a good job with what they're given. I wasn't the wildest about the characters in this movie. You've got a lot of redneck stereotype characters, and the two brothers, one of whom's a little bit more shy and wimpy, and the older brother who is a bit more forward and a little bit of a jerk. And at first they weren't particularly likable or well developed, but I thought they were fun. But as the dark elements of the movie unfold, with a lot of the characters who I was like, these guys are just assholes, you start to see a little bit of what's underneath all of that. There is something behind these somewhat stereotypical and annoying characters. There is something of a heart there. You start to see that despite all these constant, pretty obnoxious jabs, Josh really does, in his heart, love his brother. The whole town is really, really struggling with this threat that they don't understand. There is also something of what I thought was a bit of an unnecessary romance subplot between older brother Josh and this girl who he meets, who is both a school teacher and a barmaid in the town. While they felt like just kind of stereotypes at the beginning, they did get more and more developed, and seeing them try to support each other in this really apocalyptic setting was actually pretty well done. It didn't really grab me the way characters in other zombie movies have done. It still blows me away how much I care about the characters in Night of the Living Dead, with barely any really setup for who they are. Other movies like Return of the Living Dead have more of a comedic vibe, but I still do care about the characters. I think they're very interesting people. Anna and the Apocalypse is my favorite zombie movie, and with that one we've got sort of this more teenage romantic comedy type setup for the movie, which actually really helps you to like the characters a lot more and care about them when the zombie stuff happens. And with this movie, basically the first hour's worth of the movie is setup and getting to know the characters and peeling away some of those layers, but really not enough, I don't think. You see some of that, but you don't really see the real human side of these people until the really crazy zombie stuff starts to happen an hour in. I wasn't amazingly invested in their characters, but they were better developed than some characters in a lot of B movies, and they were very well acted. There were some scenes of just despair and terror in this really horrible situation that I thought were very, very well acted. And another one of my favorite characters was a smaller character who unfortunately didn't get all that much screen time. She was this doctor who was trying to piece together the mystery of what was going on before the whole mutant zombie thing really broke loose, and she was a very strong character, very headstrong, smart, and doing most of the detective work on the movie, which is why I wish there was a little bit more of her. I wish we got to see a bit more development with her, but she was well acted and just a character that I really liked and probably connected with the most. In terms of the stereotypical redneck characters, there is this one guy who is the first obnoxious guy we meet at the beginning of the movie, who knocks the two brothers off of the road. He just refers to them as city boy constantly and constantly. He's just the most obnoxious. He's clearly sort of the human villain that you're supposed to love to hate, which you kind of get with most zombie films. He's really more of a threat than any of the zombies are, and he just keeps coming back. There are just constant scenes of him just terrorizing and attacking our main characters. While in one way I liked that it sort of showed that the humans are the real monsters in this, whereas this is just kind of a mindless virus that is commanding this people to consume more blood. He's just a really obnoxious character, and I was just kind of like, oh god, him again, every time he was on screen. That's kind of the point with him, but it was not an enjoyable experience whenever he was on the screen. He was kind of grating. Sets, locations, costumes, and cinematography are all serviceable, but nothing really noteworthy or artistic there. It's all decently done, very casual, average clothing, a small town, some trees and stuff, and they kind of just point the camera at everybody and it looks good. Nothing artsy really there. There's some fog occasionally in the movie, and I like fog, but that's the only real aesthetic thing that I can point to. It's serviceable. There's nothing artistic there. Story-wise, the idea of this small town with something bigger and more sinister lurking underneath the surface was cool, and the whole town does really feel like a whole sort of southern stereotype for a lot of the time, which is fun, but not really enough to make me worry about the characters. And again, that's kind of where I was at for most of the movie, unfortunately, until still all hell breaks loose later on, and I really did care about the characters, but still, it just, there's a little something missing with this movie, and I can't really tell what it is. They had a whole hour to develop their characters, and they are trying. There is story and background, all these characters. The stakes are very, very high later on, but I just don't know what the missing element is with these characters. I don't feel like I cared about them enough. The whole concept in the movie isn't anything new. The science that we get earlier on, talking about like the blood cells and what it's doing to people, felt like something out of a 50s atomic horror movie. There's only white blood cells in this stuff, no red. Don't know what's going on with that, and when I accidentally spilled it on the blood that was on this handkerchief, it swallowed it up and grew. It's mutating. It just felt like something out of a 50s atomic horror movie with all the science-y explanation. And then once the zombies show up, everything goes pretty much straightforward George A. Romero style zombie movie. And it's pretty well done, I thought. And again, it's a slow burn. It's not until an hour in that we get any real mutant action. There's a little bit of it lurking in the shadows and some off-camera stuff that you're like, what's happening with that, throughout a lot of the movie. But once we do get action with the mutants in play, it is pretty good. The mutants are creepy and they really do take over the whole town. There are really sort of intense scenes with characters that you care about, family members, children who have either already been turned or die or at very high risk. There's a really intense scene where these characters are locked in the bathroom of this school and there's just zombies swarming into the room and they have to crawl out of a panel in the ceiling while they're all stuck in this little stall. They do manage to create this really intense feeling of apocalypse within the last 38 minutes of the movie. The first hour, while there is some character development stuff, it's a little bit boring. And towards the end, it does drag a little bit. And the very ending of the movie, it just kind of feels like, oh wait, yay, we kind of killed all the zombies, let's go home and have a drink, hooray. That's hardly a spoiler, because there's not really anything to spoil there. They do the thing, hooray. It just kind of happens. But up until that point, there is this really bleak atmosphere of doom and gloom that hangs over everything, and it really does work. And the other thing that really makes that work is the special effects makeup and the practical effects on the mutant zombies. It's not super over the top, but it's really well done. When they get infected, there's sort of this pulsation under their skin that's kind of gross, and it looks like the first stages of the werewolf transformation in like The Howling, when there's just this little bit of pulsation on their face. You see that in the people's hands and in their faces, but then like through the palms of their hands you just start seeing this yellow fluid start to leak out, and it looks like the tall man's blood from Phantasm. It's very, very gross and body horror-ish. There's also points where smoke comes out of the mutants, which they never really explain. I never really understood that, but it was kind of an interesting effect. They do look very bloodless and pale, and there's dark circles around their eyes, and the mutant makeup and the threat of the mutants in the final 38 minutes of the movie was the highlight for me, probably. I'm not actually going to do spoilers. I had to, but they're not big ones, and I don't really need to talk about that in order to properly review the movie, I don't think. I've kind of moved away from some of the spoiler stuff, and this, unless there's just stuff like, just, oh my god, I have to talk about the thing. This movie doesn't really have that. But all in all, I think this movie is not a must-watch by any stretch of the imagination. It's a little bit boring in places. It's kind of mediocre, but there are very good performances from a lot of the actors. They managed to make it feel like they really are in this really, really dire situation. The gross practical effects with the mutants were very well done. These sort of sequences of hordes of mutants in different areas were also very well done. So if you want to see some of that stuff, maybe give this movie a shot, but I don't think it's a must-watch up there with other zombie-type movies. So that is my review of Mutant. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one.
Bye.